Good morning. The committee will come to order. We want to thank everyone for being here today. Special thanks to all our witnesses for coming and to share their insights and expertise with this committee on the very timely and very important subject matter that we will be discussing here this morning. Cybersecurity is one of the most pressing but least understood challenges of our time. The American government, American businesses, and Americans themselves are attacked over the Internet on a daily basis. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. These attacks come from criminal syndicates, hacktivists, and foreign nations. They're after intellectual property, bank accounts, Social Security numbers, and anything else that they can use for financial gain or for a competitive edge. The increasing number of attacks come as more people are using the Internet than ever before. In the past 5 years, global Internet traffic has increased more than 5-fold, and in the next 5 years, this number will triple. This isn't the Internet of 1995, when most Americans simply got online to check their email. Today, we're using the Internet in increasingly innovative and practical ways. Some pay for coffee with their phones, request ride-sharing service to an exact location, stream live video, even bank online. Just 2 years ago, average amounts stolen from small business bank accounts was around $7,000, and in just 2 years, last year, that nearly tripled to $20,000. This technology and our use of it is the underpinning of our modern economy and the foundation of our future. That's why we must address cybersecurity now, so that as a country and as the leader in the global marketplace, we can operate without fear of attack. We need the peace of mind that we have adequately prepared, we are protected, and we are constantly learning and adapting and strengthening those systems of protection against cyber attacks. When hackers affect large corporations, it's a breaking news alert on television and probably on our smartphones. But the majority of cyber attacks happen at small businesses. In fact, 71% of cyber attacks occur at businesses with fewer than 100 employees. These are our family businesses and small manufacturers with fewer resources to combat security threats, which make them even bigger targets. A cyber attack on a big box store will be reported by the media and probably dent their bottom line. An unreported attack on a small firm may put them out of business, and those Americans who work at that small business lose their jobs. So today we are here to examine these issues through the lens of an everyday American. How do we protect ourselves and our businesses? Is it as simple as using a more complicated password, or does it require much more than that? And what is the appropriate level of the Federal Government in all of this? Not long ago, an enemy would attack us with bombs or guns or ammunition. Today, they use malware and Trojan horses. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses here this morning, and I now would like to yield to Nydia Velazquez, the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past 15 years, the Internet and associated technologies have changed the way business is conducted, from the mobile banking apps on our phones to the shopping experience offered by companies like Amazon. Activities that once took place in corner stores now take place online. The Internet also affords America's 23 million small businesses a unique opportunity to sell their products not only across the country but around the world. Today, Internet shopping is a $319 billion marketplace, and the Census Bureau estimates 58% of all U.S. shoppers will make an online purchase in the next year. As more consumers and businesses participate in e-commerce, protecting our financial information from cyber attacks is critical. Unfortunately, recent data breaches at Target, TJ Maxx, and Home Depot compromised financial data of millions of consumers and cost each company tens of millions of dollars in damages and lost sales. It also exposed the weaknesses of the current cybersecurity landscape. While these examples highlight some of the largest breaches, the small business community is not immune to the risks of a cyber attack. Over 40% of all attacks are on companies with less than 500 employees, and nearly 3/4 of small businesses report being targeted in the past year. Yet 53% of small business owners claim that the high cost in both time and money to secure their business from cyber attacks was not justified by the threat. Unfortunately, the consequences of foregoing investment in proactive cybersecurity are high. The small business that loses customer information is punished twofold: by the direct monetary toll of the breach and by the marketplace when customers leave. A data breach costs upwards of $200,000 per incident, and surveys show 20% of customers will immediately terminate their relationship with a compromised business. As a result, one study found that 60% of small businesses closed permanently within 6 months of a cyber attack. Clearly, cybersecurity should be a priority to protect our national security and economy. As we move forward, comprehensive reforms must balance a number of priorities, including being able to adapt to evolving technologies, preventing undue costs and regulations on small businesses, and protecting our sensitive information. During today's hearing, we will explore the critical issues facing small businesses that operate online. For millions of small firms, the Internet is critical to their success, yet fewer than 15% have plans in place to respond to a cyber attack. I look forward to hearing your recommendations to better educate and inform the small business community on cyber issues and how the federal government can facilitate a more robust and efficient cybersecurity environment. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the witnesses for being here today. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. And if committee members have opening statements prepared, I'd ask that they submit them for the record. And I'd now like to inform our panel of the 5-minute rule, which basically means you get 5 minutes to testify, and we'll all have 5 minutes to ask questions. There's a lighting system. The green light will stand for 4 minutes. The yellow light will come on to let you know you got a minute to wrap up. But when the red light comes on, we'd ask that you finish up as close to that time as possible. We'll give you a little bit of leeway, but not a whole lot. So, and now we'll introduce the panel. Our first witness will be Steve Grobman, who is the Chief Technology Officer with Intel Security Group at Intel Corporation. In this role, Mr. Grobman sets the technical strategy and direction for the company's security business across hardware and software platforms. Mr. Grobman holds 20 U.S. and international patents in the fields of security, software, and computer architecture. He earned his bachelor's degree in computer science from North Carolina State University. We welcome you here this morning. Our second witness will be Todd McCracken, who serves as president of the National Small Business Association, the NSBA. NSBA is the nation's oldest small business organization, having been founded all the way back in 1937. Mr. McCracken is a graduate of Trinity University with a BA in economics. We welcome you. And our third witness will be B. Dan Berger, who is the president and CEO of the National Association of Federal Credit Unions. Mr. Berger earned a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University and a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from Florida State University, and we welcome you here as well, Mr. Berger. And I'll now yield to our ranking member to introduce our fourth witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Jane LeClaire is the Chief Operating Officer for the National Cybersecurity Institute at Excelsior College here in Washington, D.C., where she focuses on cybersecurity training, social engineering, and women in cyber. Previously, she served as Dean of the School of Business and Technology at Excelsior College and worked in the nuclear energy sector for over 20 years. She is a vocal advocate for attracting and retaining more women in the technology fields and established the Dr. Jane A. LeClaire Scholarship Fund for Women in Technology at Excelsior College in 2012. Dr. LeClaire holds a number of degrees, notably an EDD from Syracuse University and an MBA from City University. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from our very distinguished panel here this morning. And Mr. Grobman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velazquez, and other members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Steve Grobman, Intel Fellow and Chief Technology Officer for Intel Security Group at Intel Corporation. Intel is a world leader in computing innovation. The company designs and builds the essential technologies that serve as the foundation for the world's computing devices. Security, along with power-efficient performance and connectivity, are key elements of our innovation efforts. As Chief Technology Officer for Intel Security Group, I set the technical strategy and direction for the company's security business across hardware and security platforms. Intel and I appreciate the committee's interest in the importance of protecting small business from cybersecurity threats. My testimony will focus on three main areas: the threat landscape and its implication for small business, how best practices and education can help small business, and how industry can deliver innovative security solutions to help small business. The threat landscape and specific implications for small business are very unique. Small businesses need to comprehend a wide range of threats, including attacks from criminals, hacktivists, state actors, and bulk malware that we see targeting consumers. But they also have some very unique challenges. They typically have insufficient cyber defenses, thus becoming an attractive perspective for criminal actors, but yet make up a major portion of the GDP. The other element with small business is small business can act as a conduit or element of a larger breach focused on large enterprise or government. The latter example is not a hypothetical. Elements of a 2014 major breach compromised a small business as one of the key elements to land on the network of a large enterprise, and thus became a key factor in that enterprise's overall loss. Understanding how small business impacts supply chain and other elements of large business and government is something that we must comprehend when looking at small business. Attacks are not only technological, they take advantage of both social engineering and a wide range of attacks on varying platforms, from PCs, mobile devices, new cloud architectures, embedded devices, and even hardware. The challenge with cybersecurity defense is that the attacker has an inherent advantage. It's an asymmetric environment where a targeted attack against a small business gives the advantage to the attacker. The attacker understands what tools and defensive measures are deployed generally at small business. They also understand that the pragmatic cost constraints of a small business will be such that they can't afford the same degree of a cyber operations staff that you would see in some large enterprises or governments. But the most profound reason that we see the asymmetry in the attack advantage being to the attacker is the attacker only needs to be right once, whereas to defend against cyber attacks, you need to be right always. And this is extremely challenging, especially in a small business environment. To counteract the cybersecurity risks of small business, a few key actions need to be taken. Small business, along with all enterprise, need to be thinking about how security evolves. The concept of protection against all cyber threats is not possible in today, and we need to shift our thinking to more of a thought process that cyber attacks will occur and be able to not only defend against them, but detect them when they occur and correct back to a known good state. This concept of not only comprehending protection, but detection and correction is key to the way the industry should develop our next generation of architectures. It's also important that we understand education for all organizations, regardless of whether you're a small business or large enterprise. A key educational tool is the cybersecurity framework, which Intel has been a proponent of and has been a strong advocate in integrating into its own systems. The final point that I'd like to make is new technologies are at the cusp of enabling small businesses to be successful in the emerging threat landscape, things such as software as a service in cloud, and we will see small businesses shifting to these types of technologies as we move forward. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. I will be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCracken, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here this morning. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, the rest of the members of the committee to be here to testify on the impact of cybersecurity and credit card fraud issues on the health and growth potential of millions of small businesses. I want to focus today a little bit on the overall threat of cybersecurity on small companies, but then also focus a little bit more specifically on the credit card issue, since there's a lot of talk about small companies and the conversion to EMV and the liability shift this year that probably is worthy of a little bit of attention. In the last few years, cybersecurity has emerged as a significant problem and concern for the small business community. By the end of 2014, according to our year-end economic report, fully half of small companies reported that having been the victim of a cyber attack, up from 44% in 2013. And of those, 61% say an attack has occurred in the last year. While a 14% increase in the number of small businesses becoming victims is significant, we believe the real story is the increasing impact those attacks are having on small businesses in terms of the interruption of normal business operations and the direct financial cost of the attacks. In 2013, only 12% of companies reported that the resolution of the cyber attack required more than 1 week. By late 2014, more than 1 in 5 such attacks were still unresolved in 1 week, with 13% of them requiring more than 2 weeks. 3 in 5 companies experienced a service interruption, and a third had their websites go down for some period. A significant problem for small companies, as Mr. Groban just talked about, is that many small companies are not in a position to have a dedicated IT department, and many either outsource their IT functions or assign such duties to an employee who has other responsibilities, often the owner, him or herself. You can read the survey results for yourself. We found in our surveys that significant numbers of companies, between 25 and 40% in the last 4 years, report that the owner, him or herself, is the primary technical support IT person. They do it themselves, in addition to being the chief marketing officer and chief product development officer and everything else. And so this is an enormous constraint on how they can respond. And in the case of another significant share of companies, they outsource the IT function to some other company. Of course, the difficulty there is these small businesses, in the event of a crisis, those smaller clients typically aren't the first priority for those IT firms. They have other clients, and some of the bigger clients that pay them more money that will get a quicker response. So those are unique challenges for small companies. But the big eye-opener in our last survey is the increasing cost of these cyber attacks. We looked specifically at what money had been stolen from them from bank accounts, and we found that in 2 years, the amount that was stolen went from about $7,000 to about $20,000 on average. A 188% increase in that amount of time, which is staggering. We think that's largely the result of not only the total increase in the amount of phishing scams out there and malware, but also the increasing effectiveness of those. They've become much more real to people. They believe them in a way that they didn't 2 or 3 years ago for a variety of reasons. So this is clearly a national problem, and these attacks are coming often from outside the country. We've got to find a way to limit those attacks while increasing the education of small companies as to how to avoid them. The next issue I want to talk about briefly is credit cards in small companies. Various forms of credit card fraud have become more prevalent. So we've seen the desire to shift to EMV or the chip-based cards. So there's this October 1st, we're going to see a shift in liability for fraud, credit card fraud, to whichever company has the least at least advanced technology, essentially. So if you don't have a EMV reader, then the company could be liable. So those companies really think about what kind of chargebacks they've had, what kind of company they run, what kind of products they sell, who their customers are, do they know their customers, to decide if they need to invest now in those more up-to-date readers, or whether they won't see a significant increase in fraud if they stay where they are now. But we clearly think that shifting to a more secure credit card environment ultimately has got to be the solution for overall credit card fraud, because we don't think that continuing to rely on magnetic stripe technology is likely to be our future. We have to make the shift and make it fairly quickly, because there are too many incentives to shift that data there. So again, with those highlights, you can read the rest of my statement as it is written, but I appreciate the time to be here today, and I stand ready to answer your questions when it's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berger, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velazquez, members of the committee. My name is Dan Berger, and I'm testifying today on behalf of NAFCU, where I serve as President and CEO. NAFCU and our member credit unions, small businesses themselves, appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee today on cyber and data security. Cyber and data security needs to be everyone's responsibility. More can and must be done to protect small businesses and consumers on this very important issue. NAFCU has long supported comprehensive data and cybersecurity measures to protect consumers' sensitive data. Credit unions and other financial institutions already protect data consistent with the provisions of the 1999 Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Unfortunately, there is no similar regulatory structure for other entities that may handle sensitive personal and financial data. Gramm-Leach-Bliley and its implementing regulations have successfully limited data breaches among financial institutions. This standard has a proven track record and should be recognized in any future requirements. Gramm-Leach-Bliley requires financial institutions to address the risks presented by the complexity and scope of their business. This allows flexibility, ensures the regulatory framework is workable for the largest and smallest financial institutions. Gramm-Leach-Bliley is an example of how a scalability is achievable for varying sized businesses. A data security breach can have a huge impact on consumers, from waiting for new cards to be issued to updating all existing accounts connected with a compromised card. Breaches can also result in fraud losses, damaged credit ratings, and even identity theft. Over 23% of Americans had their financial identities compromised by a data breach in 2014. A recent survey of NAFCU member credit unions found that the respondents were alerted to potential breaches an average of 164 times in 2014, a huge increase from 2013. It is important to remember, when credit unions are alerted to breaches, they take action to respond to their members and to protect their members. Our survey also found that in 2014, the average credit union spent $136,000 on new data security measures, in addition to spending $226,000 in costs associated with merchant data breaches. The three main elements of these costs were card reissuance, fraud losses, and account monitoring. Ultimately, this takes away from providing other services and products to their members. Small credit unions, such as Diebold Federal Credit Union in North Canton, Ohio, are especially feeling the impact. Since the beginning of 2014, Diebold has had over $32,000 in losses from data breaches from retailers. While that may not seem like much, but for a small business like them, it's a huge burden on that institution. Unfortunately, credit unions rarely see any reimbursement for these costs. Even when there are recruitment opportunities, such as the recent Target settlement with MasterCard, it is usually only pennies on the dollar in terms of real costs and losses incurred. Recognizing that a legislative solution is a very complex issue, NAFCU has established a set of guiding principles we would like to see in data security legislation, including reimbursement of all costs by the breach entity, national standards for safekeeping of consumer information, breach notification to financial institutions, disclosure of the breach entity to consumers, and, of course, enforcement of data retention prohibitions. Enforcement of the prohibition on data retention cannot be overstated. It is a common-sense way to cut down on emerging threats. If there is no financial data to steal, it's not worth the effort of the cyber criminals. In essence, if there's no treasure, there's no pirate. NAFCU believes that a possible solution on this issue is a bipartisan legislation introduced by Senators Blunt and Carper. Their bill, the Data Security Act of 2015, sets a strong national data security standard based on Gramm-Leach-Bliley that would be extended to all entities who handle consumer data. We urge the House to take a similar approach. We'd also like to recognize and thank the House leadership, as well as this committee, for the ongoing focus on cyber and data security issues, including the cyber bills you have on the floor this week. A safer system ultimately benefits all participants, including consumers, financial institutions, and, of course, small businesses. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of NAFCU. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Dr. LeClaire, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on behalf of the National Cybersecurity Institute at Excelsior College, I appreciate the opportunity to address you and provide a statement for today's hearing. The National Cybersecurity Institute is dedicated to increasing knowledge in the cybersecurity discipline and assists small businesses to better understand and meet the challenges in today's digital world. My name is Dr. Jane LeClaire, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of the National Cybersecurity Institute located in Washington, D.C. Small businesses are challenged both by the ability and the desire to secure themselves against cyber threats, which makes them uniquely vulnerable to cyber attacks. 50% of small businesses have been the victims of cyber attack, and over 60% of those receiving a significant attack go out of business. Often, small businesses do not even know they've been breached until it is too late. Small businesses are under attack from many avenues, including social engineering, the Internet of Things, insider threat, weak passwords, and cyber theft through weak payment systems. Mobile devices and the lack of formal cyber plans and policies spell trouble. Infections brought in through browsers pose a threat. And finally, outdated technology and poor maintenance top the list of problems. Small businesses are characterized by central management focused around the owner, with a lack of a specialized IT or cyber staff, inadequate control systems, and day-to-day rather than long-term planning for asset protection. Almost 70% of small businesses manage their own websites, use the Internet for sales, social media, marketing, and a host of other needs. Small businesses have resource constraints and often ignore cybersecurity in favor of day-to-day operations or other financial needs. Yet small businesses remain a gateway to gain access to clients, business partners, donors, and contractors working with a small business, a backdoor into many large organizations. These organizations frequently lack the knowledge to develop and implement a cyber policy or the expertise to develop a response strategy. Surprisingly, 96% of the attacks on small businesses were fundamentally basic attacks. Small businesses need employees trained in networking, operating systems, and multiple layers of security. Otherwise, who's watching for the signs of an attack and making sure the operating systems are properly patched? Who's responsible for regular backups and reviewing system logs? There are several ways the National Cybersecurity Institute is offering assistance to the small businesses. An affordable package that provides a targeted cybersecurity plan, basic training for owners, IT staff, and employees, and ensures that the basics of antivirus software and firewall protection are in place, is under development. Our media campaign raises awareness through quarterly webinars and weekly blogs. The National Cybersecurity Institute is publishing 2 short books on cybersecurity for small business and cyber insurance, and is partnering to offer a small business workshop in medium-sized cities around the country that is affordable and aimed at small business owners and their IT staff. Cybersecurity is without a doubt one of the prime concerns of the small business community in America today. The efforts of this committee in seeking ways to help alleviate those concerns cannot be understated. Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, thank you for your interest in this important area, and I thank you for the opportunity to address you today.
Thank you very much. We want to thank all the witnesses for their very excellent testimony here. And I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes now to begin the questioning. I'll begin with you, Mr. Grobman, if I can. I appreciated your comment, particularly about the attackers only have to be right once, and the business community needs to be right every time, or you're going to undergo some serious damage. You heard that a lot after September 11th, too, in dealing with overall terrorism, that we have to be very secure all the time, and it only takes a terrorist one time to really wreak havoc. And I think it's certainly the case here, because this is really a form of terrorism in many ways. Could you kind of walk us through the various stages of a modern cyber attack on, say, a small business, for example?
Sure. What would typically happen is if it's a targeted attack, they would focus first on what we call reconnaissance, so understanding what capabilities the small business is actually running so that they can craft an attack that would be able to be successful in that environment. Once they have that information, they can customize a capability that would be able to work through standardized defenses if the small business has them in order to get into the environment, and then they focus on perpetrating whatever their actual objective is, typically the theft of information or in the case of either hacktivism or nation state, it might be more of a destructive nature. So it's really a well-formed set of steps that is well understood by the attack community on how to perpetrate such an attack. The thing that is unique here is it can be customized for the target, which makes it very difficult to protect with standard technology.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berger, let me turn to you. On behalf of the credit unions, as far as the banking community, are the attacks that you see in the credit unions, are they similar to what you see in the say, in community banks and that sort of thing? Are there similarities? Are there differences? What would you say?
The attacks that we're seeing are very similar across the board. It doesn't matter what size the entity is. It's the old phrase that the attack where the money is. But because we have Graham Leach Bliley, we have some serious protocols in place that we have to deal with as a financial institution to make sure the consumer's information is protected. And so, but the attacks are the same, no matter what size the entity is.
Thank you. Mr. McCracken and Dr. LeClaire, I'll address the next question to the two of you. What steps are being taken to level the playing field to more effectively defend against cyber attacks, and how important is information sharing to those efforts? Either one of you, which wants to go?
I would say information sharing is key today. We can't silo ourselves, and we need to work both jointly with government and private industry to ensure the information is shared and that we're able to protect as we need to.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McCracken?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's very important to get the information out there so that companies can understand what the real threats are and how they can protect themselves, and then share it up within the supply chain. We think there's a significant role that various members of the supply chain need to play in helping each other deal with these attacks, because all those companies are interlinked. It's very clear.
There are various things that we as members of Congress and our staff deal with in trying to keep attacks, cyber attacks on the government. Such things as changing our passwords, and they've improved the passwords to it's a little harder to get them in, and you got to remember them, a little more difficulty. It can't just be your cat's name or your dog's name and that sort of thing. You got to put question marks after the cat's name now or whatever. But it's a bit more complicated. And they're also changed periodically, and I don't necessarily want to give out government secrets here as to how often we have to change it, but it was a certain number of months, and now that's been shortened to a fewer number of months. What's the private sector doing along those, and what would you recommend to small businesses in that area? Mr. Groban?
Chairman, I think one of the things that Intel Security is investing in is solving or helping to provide key assets for this problem by making biometrics available to a much broader audience, including small business and consumers. So when you prove that you really are you to another entity, you're doing it not just with a password, which can be transferred to somebody else, but you actually need to use something like facial recognition in order to do that. And I think as these technologies become more consumable, they'll be a key part of the strategy to solve the problem you articulate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just for the record, we don't have a cat. We have a turtle, and I'm not going to tell you what his name is. So I'll now yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. LeClaire, as we heard today, financial data security is becoming a priority for small businesses. And given the fact that more small businesses begin offering online and mobile buying options. So many of the firms, as Mr. McCracken stated, cannot hire an IT staff. Can you elaborate on the cybersecurity package that NCI is working on or developing to offer small business that opportunity?
One of the things that we have under development is a package that would work for small businesses because of the financial constraints they have. That package would allow them to get the basic training for the organization owner as well as their employees, but special training for if that individual is their own IT person or if they have another person in the organization who they've selected to do their IT work, to give them the basic training they need to be able to know about to secure their systems, ensuring that they have basic antivirus firewall protection as well, and that they are able to develop a policy with us. We have a template, basically a starter template for them that we would work with them to develop their policy as well as a risk assessment plan for them. So kind of a all-in-one package for them to be able to work with.
Thank you. How important do you think is to create a national notification standards to replace the existing 49 separate state laws governing breach notification?
We feel that's very important. We have spoken about that a couple of places because right now there's 47 states that have different rules and policies. The ability to clarify for organizations the overall requirements would not only simplify, but it would allow people to better able to know what they have to do in that time frame. And in some people's case, they feel it will be difficult to meet, but I think overall in a short time, people will adjust and it will help us in the long term.
Thank you. Mr. Grobman, there has been much emphasis recently on cloud computing, and this new model is gaining great traction within the business community and the government. How does cloud computing impact cybersecurity, particularly for small businesses?
So cloud computing is a major asset to helping small business, both as providing the means to execute functions that they're ill-equipped to do as a traditional IT organization would, especially in the area of cybersecurity defense. Cloud computing, and specifically what we call software as a service, allows a service-based capability to provide security solutions to a small business. In our submitted testimony, we gave an example where the City of Kenosha, with an IT staff of 3, is able to use a cloud-based solution to provide email protection for all of its government workers. And I think that's a good example of how cloud technology can be a key asset to small business.
Thank you. Mr. Berger, many small businesses have been quite critical of the high interchange fees charged by credit card issuers. We have seen, or we have been told, that these fees were needed to cover not only the cost of processing transactions, but also to cover the cost of fraud, theft, and data breaches. With the U.S. Scheduled to move to the more secure chip and PIN technology in October, do you expect interchange fees to come down?
Well, interchange fees were created before there was capped to create the rails, to invest in the rails and the technology, as well as for fraud recoupment. Now that there's a cap on interchange fees, that's no longer that's not the case. It's for fraud prevention, and so I don't think the interchange fees will go down because there's no recoupment for financial institutions any longer with the cap.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. McCracken, it is often hard to persuade small firms to spend money without seeing an immediate return. So what do you think we need to do in order to get more small businesses to understand the importance on investing in cybersecurity?
Well, there's a number of different fronts. One is on the credit card front. I think when they start seeing more chip-based cards, many more of them will begin investing in the readers to use them rather than the other way around, which is unfortunately the way it seems to have been pursued so far. And in larger cybersecurity, I really do think education is everything. And I think that larger companies who do business with smaller companies have a significant role to play in helping and educating them figure out how to implement some of these services. And also education on the implications, because it is true that one mistake from a small company can be devastating for them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Hanna, who is the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Chairman. I want to ask about not just responsibility to protect one's system, but liability as it moves across what the staff calls like a chain. The Internet is comprised of technology links that are dependent on each other. Is it incumbent upon a bigger organization to help a smaller organization? And what do you see the future of that? Because clearly, the perception of risk vis-a-vis liability varies across industries, and willingness to provide support to protect oneself it varies on the individual and their means. So much of this is subjective, yet because of its interconnectedness, it's all critical. So, Mr. Grobman, you talked about the cloud and how that offers. If everybody would like to speak to that, if that's a fair question, I'd be
Sure. I think it is key for large enterprise to understand the implications that a breach to a small business supply chain or supplier would have, and there are key steps large business can take to help small businesses in this manner. One key example is advocacy and linkage to things like the cybersecurity framework as a part of supplier guidelines.
When you say advocacy, what about demand? I mean, there must be a point at which somebody says, if you don't do this, we can't do business with you.
Sure. I think understanding the risk profile of a supplier is a reasonable thing for a large business to do, and having a common language to understand and describe risk is something that the cybersecurity framework can help facilitate. So I think it's those sorts of communication interactions can help large business assess the risk of using various suppliers.
How do you feel about that, Mr. McCracken, being a representative of small businesses being demanded to do that?
Well, on the one hand, I think that's a way forward, because that, as I discussed before, the supply chain issues are real, and we have to have ways of both educating and also helping those smaller companies, but giving them incentives beyond the maybe something might happen later, which they see now.
Stuff.
Yeah. I think the danger we have to keep in mind is that what you do when you do that is you begin to restrict some of those possibilities for companies that are trying to grow. Because if you don't, if what we're already saying is larger companies saying, look, if you don't have X capabilities, don't even send us, you don't even apply to do business with us. Well, I think that's a mistake, because what you're going to see is larger and larger companies all working together. Mm-hmm. What I would like to see is for those companies to put in standards that once you are a vendor of ours, here's how we're going to work together to get you to this point. Mm-hmm. That, I think, would be much more productive and really help smaller companies grow to the point they need to be.
Mr. Berger?
And as part of Gramm-Leach-Bliley implementation rules, we're required to ensure that third-party vendors are up to speed, and the NCOA examines for that.
Ms. LeClaire?
I don't disagree with anything that the other folks have said. What I do see is it's very difficult for small businesses and any organization to know what to use. And coming from a commercial nuclear power background, it wasn't until after the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations came into being that there was an organization that fully structured what was happening in that industry. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, yes, I agree, and in others I see that you need some definitive, as you said, organization to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Grobman, I got a minute and a few seconds here. I want to ask you about mobile devices.
Sure.
And the ubiquitous nature of that. How do you deal with that?
I think mobile devices are both a key benefit in cybersecurity. They've been developed more recently and have had the opportunity to redesign the underlying software architecture to put individual applications into sandboxes. So I think that's a very positive aspect. The flip side of it, though, is mobile devices are also generally more closed, where the security industry has challenges in looking at the information of what's going on a mobile device. So when we look at a modern way to do detection of an advanced attack, it's really about understanding the data that is coming out of your environment as far as different events, and the mobile devices don't lend themselves very well to that. So, mobile is still a fairly new area relative to other capabilities, and is something we're looking at very closely.
Thank you very much. My time's expired.
Thank you. The gentleman's time's expired. The gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez, and thank you to the speakers for your insightful remarks. And of course, this is a critical issue, and I think about collaboration as I think about this. And my question, Dr. LeClaire, to you, are credit unions and community banks working hand in hand with the small business industry to develop the financial resources that help protect the assets of small businesses, as well as the investments of financial firms from the effects of a cyber attack?
Are they working? Was that your question?
Yes. I mean, is there collaboration in terms of the banks and the businesses?
Yes, the collaboration that's out there is what we need to have and continue to have in order to be able to not only be prepared but to recover.
Is it working, in your opinion?
I think that we have a ways to go still.
Okay. All right. Protecting the businesses, of course, is crucial, but it's also costly, especially when we talk about small businesses. And most of the insurance that small businesses have does not actually cover cyber attacks. What can we do to encourage that?
Again, from the standpoint of if you're talking cyber insurance.
Right. And investing in the...
And investing, yes. I don't think that small businesses really have any clear understanding of cyber insurance and what the capabilities are for them. I think it's a new area that's being developed. One of the reasons we're writing a book is to be able to give that to small businesses so they can understand what the options are out there for them and what they can expect from it.
Thank you. Ms. McCracken, can you comment on?
Well, I do think it's worth noting that many very small companies are run by people who, they're at the nexus of the individual and the business world. I mean, they see their company, they're very small companies I'm talking about now, as extensions of themselves, and they often are very surprised to find out that their business bank accounts do not have the same kinds of protections that a consumer or personal account might have. And so when they're the victim of some sort of a phishing scheme and their money is just gone, they initially often expect, well, I'll go to the bank and we'll get this fixed, like I know my neighbor did. And in fact, if it's a business account, that's simply not the case in many cases, because they operate under different standards, they have different levels of protections. So I think that's something that we may need to address, and certainly something we need to educate more small companies about in the first place, because they don't understand it.
Okay. I was going to follow up with a question about the technological sophistication that was necessary, and I think you've probably answered that. But, Mr. Grubman, would you like to comment?
Sure. I think one of the important things on the education side for small business is we can simplify some of the critical questions to something every small business can understand, whether they are running security operations for themselves or relying on others. Even simply asking the questions of, how would I be able to detect if a breach has occurred, and what would my plan be to get back to a known good state after a breach? Those are things that I think, unfortunately, many small businesses don't think about. They understand the threat of cybersecurity is real, but they're maniacally focused on protecting without thinking about the other elements. And I think just those simple education things are key things that we need to do as a partnership.
Okay. Mr. Berger, would you comment, please?
Yes, ma'am. We completely agree. I think education is a very important component, because some of the cyber experts, when they're looking at it from a forensic standpoint, they say 80% of credit card fraud and data breaches could be prevented by some simple things that the Chairman actually talked about, is updating the patches and doing the downloads that are necessary and changing your passwords on a regular basis. Something like 80% of those breaches could be stopped.
Okay.
So it is an education component to that as well.
Proactive. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and I apologize for having to leave. I had to change my password. The gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Hardy, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Groman, you mentioned that small and medium businesses are just as vulnerable as the same as the sophisticated cybersecurity threats as large corporations. Although small businesses are vulnerable as large corporations, do you think that the susceptible threats to emphasize are, do you believe that the cyber criminals are only targeting small business because they know that they do not have cybersecurity, and to large businesses, or would these cyber criminals only focus on the large corporations due to their financial benefit?
I think what we see is adversaries go after targets that will most effectively meet their objectives. If their objective is to generate money, they will look at, is it more valuable to breach a large company and steal a mega database, or target many small businesses and breach many of them? And I think we see both happening per the data that we cite. So it's not one size fits all, and that is one of the reasons why it's critical that all organizations think about cybersecurity, because it's really about the objectives of the adversary.
Thank you. Mr. McCracken, with that being said, you mentioned that the EMV will be costly to small business and for replacing that equipment and training for the employees on how to use that. I understand your concern for that small business owner and these costs, but don't you believe that the cost is in significant comparison to the loss to the consumer and the potential that it may impact that small business in maybe losing business competition with by not implementing those standards?
Well, what's going to go into place October 1st is a shift in liability. So if they don't have a chip card reader and that kind of card comes in and it's fraudulent, they're on the hook rather than the issuing bank. Our point was there are many small companies that simply don't have the kind of customer base where they're subject to that kind of fraud. I mean, if you're a deli and all you're selling are sandwiches and sodas on credit cards, the odds that someone is going to take a stolen credit card number and come into your shop and buy a whole bunch of sandwiches is probably pretty remote. Also, if you know all your customers personally, then you're probably not at very much risk for that kind of fraud. But if you sell high dollar electronics or jewelry and you don't know who your customers are, you better switch to the EMV system as soon as possible, because you're going to be on the hook for those. That's really our point. But we want to get to the point really where magstripe cards don't exist anymore. We think that really is the ultimate solution, because right now we have these kind of cards that are very easy to put fraudulent data on and go out and use. And so long as those exist, we think cyber criminals are going to find ways to get that data, if not this way, then that way. And we can patch this and it'll pop up over here. We've got to get to a point where we have only chip-based cards.
Thank you. Mr. Berger, I appreciate your statement when you just stated that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. I believe that is the truth. Also, you state that the United States government is identifying malicious actions in their networks and preparing to monitor programs that strengthen their areas. I guess the question is, the private sector, do you see the expansion or the growth of things like LifeLock and other businesses growing out of this challenge that we're having to help the small businesses, or will that be a benefit at all to them? Or
I think any improvement in technology that prevents cyber fraud is fantastic and is welcomed. But when you have the entire payment ecosystem, if you have the financial institutions, the payment processors, the payment networks, all doing a pretty darn good job in protecting people's personal and financial data, the cyber criminals attack the weakest component of that ecosystem. And so from our standpoint, we still think there needs to be a national standard at a minimum, not on an equal basis, but on a flexible basis, because I'm not talking about the small mom and pops where you get your Yoo-Hoos and your Slim Jims from, but some of the larger retailers, it's flexible and it should be scalable, but there needs to be some set standard to hold people accountable for that kind of stuff. But back to your original, we do like the technology, and we welcome any technology that prevents the bad guys from winning.
And I guess my last question, maybe to one or all of you, is just what are we doing together as a collaborative group here, along with the Federal Government, to assure this can happen in a quick, safe manner, because its expediency is a real importance.
I think from going back to the original question, we keep going to the 10%. If you think of the 90-10 rule, where 90% of the issues revolve around people, we focus a lot of our time on the 10%, which is the technology. So I think we have to continue to think of the 90% and how we're going to educate people, because they are in every piece and part of what we talk about.
The gentleman's time's expired. Did any other witnesses want to answer that? Mr. Berger?
Yeah, just real quickly, this being Washington, D.C., there's probably 35 coalitions working on this issue right now here. So we're all part of it. There's a collaborative effort amongst merchants, financial institutions, as well as the payment networks.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Gentlelady from New York, Ms. Meng, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here and helping us learn more about this newer and important topic. My question is in relation to the SBA and many of the resource centers and locations that they have in throughout the U.S. and particularly in my home county and borough of Queens, New York. What more can the SBA do, whether it's trainings, increasing awareness, and are there any incentives, financial incentives, that might be helpful for small businesses to encourage them to have these plans in place? Anyone can answer.
I can start out. I think one of the things that we could work on is perhaps grants for small businesses in order to upgrade their security and train their staff. So those would be a quick start to get us there.
I think one of the other things is the very nature of cybersecurity is that it changes very rapidly, and it's very difficult to use static policies to really resolve the core issues. The SBA has a strong relationship with small business and is structured well to comprehend rapid change in the evolving landscape, and looking at it from that perspective may be a key area of focus.
And if I may add, the SBA actually has done a pretty good job in creating recently some workshops and modules for small business that deal specifically with cyber and data security and do some of the components to protect their small business.
Do you think there are additional measures that the SBA or Federal Government can take in addition to what they're already doing, maybe working or collaborating with law enforcement? Is that something that we should see more of in relation to small businesses?
One suggestion I have actually is helping us to sharpen the focus on the problem, because of course, as we talked about today, when we say small business, we're talking about all different kinds of companies in various stages of development, different supply chains, different industries, different access to data. I really think that one role that some centralized agency, perhaps the SBA, could play is to try to define the nature of various threats and the kinds of companies that might face them the most, and focus that and try to figure out how we can focus our efforts. And instead of saying let's outreach to small business, let's talk about what do we need to do with this type of retailer or someone who has access to health records. And I think we really have to get much more specific about the kinds of approaches that we need to use, and the SBA might be able to help with that.
And just lastly, in terms of just curious, can you tell if a lot of these attacks are coming more from international or domestic? Does that have an effect on the kind of attacks?
I think we see attacks coming from all facets. I think the thing that we do see is regardless of whether an attack is coming from an origin that's domestic or international. They're using the same playbook. So the way that we ultimately defend against cybersecurity issues, I think, will be less about where they originate than what they're actually trying to achieve.
We're seeing the same thing. They don't discriminate. The cyber criminals will attack from anywhere.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. And the gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member as well. Over 250 credit unions have their headquarters in my state of Michigan, and more than 4.5 million Michiganders have membership in these credit unions. I want to thank the credit union representatives for making sure that my staff and I clearly understand the challenges you face in the event of data security for no fault of your own. Mr. Berger, what are data breaches costing credit unions, and have these costs been increasing, and what do these cost impacts have on credit unions to provide services to their members?
For just the Home Depot breach alone was $30 million. And you combine Target and all the other breaches in 2014, it's close to $80 million it hit credit unions.
Oh, wow.
And what happens is that we don't rarely get any reimbursement for those recoup losses. And so we're calling for is some kind of national standard that holds people accountable for those breaches. And we talked about shifting to EMV and chip technology, and that's a really important component. But it's not a panacea. That'll prevent credit card fraud. But going to EMV or chip technology would not have stopped any of the Target or Home Depot breaches whatsoever. And so it's really important to kind of separate credit card fraud from data breaches, and we need to address data breaches and make sure it's a level playing field, because I mentioned earlier, when you look at the payment ecosystem, the cyber criminals attack the weakest component of it. And so if everybody's doing their job and everybody's responsible for cyber and data security, everybody has to be on that level playing field and doing their part.
Well, I look forward to working with the chair and the ranking member, as well as my fellow members of Congress. I just left a briefing the issue of cybersecurity, and thank you for understanding that we need to look at data breaches as well as a separate entity. And I just look forward to joining with you to address this issue. Thank all the individuals who are here today to testify. Thank you so much, and I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. And in lieu of a second round, having discussed this with the ranking member, we just got one question I think we'd both jointly just like to ask the panel, and you can respond in any way that you would like to. Chairman McCall, who's chair of the Homeland Security Committee, has legislation which will be coming to the floor tomorrow, so it was very timely. The Small Business Committee looking at the aspects of how cyber attacks affect small businesses. So it was very timely to have you all here today, because we're going to be voting on legislation that's somewhat relevant this week, tomorrow. And in a nutshell, the legislation seeks to strengthen the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center's role as the lead civilian interface for the sharing of cybersecurity risks and incidents. It also aims to preserve existing public-private partnerships to ensure ongoing collaboration on cybersecurity. So if perhaps, and I'll just start with you, Mr. Grobman, we just get out of the line. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I would. I think one very important aspect to comprehend is that sharing of information is one aspect of what is needed for an effective cyber defense. Getting data from global threat intelligence, sharing between entities, but also very important is the data that is local to the organization, and combining all of those types of data together in a analytical capability to determine when a breach is underway and be able to react quickly is critical. I do become concerned that there's a focus on just one of the elements around data sharing being the thing that will make things go away. It's as much about looking at the data we have more effectively than just collecting more data.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCracken, did you want to comment?
Yeah, not a link, but I would generally agree with Mr. Groban's remarks. And the bill seems, I think, a positive and a step in the right direction, but obviously will not be a panacea, but it will certainly help. Information sharing for small companies is useful, but we've got to actually give them a lot more direction on how to use that information as well.
Thank you. Mr. Berger?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do support the legislation, but we think there needs to be really 3 key components to be successful in all this cyber and data security. One is the sharing of information. Number 2 is notification. And number 3, we still think there needs to be a national standard for retailers and merchants. We need to make sure there's a level playing field and everybody's doing their part in holding folks accountable.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Leclerc?
I think that goes back to my earlier comment where I talked about the nuclear industry, where you have a central entity that looks at lessons learned, what's happening, identifying that, notification to other organizations within that area, and then standards were created there. So those are the 3 things very similar to what you were talking about. So very similar comment.
Thank you very much. And I know the ranking member and I would like to thank our witnesses for their participation today. I'd ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.